Well, it's a case that dominated headlines for nearly 2 decades, and this week it's back in the spotlight with a new development.
18-year-old Hae Min Lee disappeared on January 13th. Police found her half-buried body. She had been strangled.
It's the real-life whodunit that's become a near obsession for millions around the world. In 1999, Baltimore teen Hae Min Lee went to school but never came home. Her body found in a shallow grave almost 1 month later.
Well, we were very concerned. As we stated, it was approximately 1 month. We were naturally hoping for the best. But, this is a sad time for all of us.
Her ex-boyfriend was accused of the crime, later convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
He's identified as a 17-year-old Woodlawn student. His name is Adnan Syed.
Behind bars now for almost 2 decades, Adnan, along with his supporters, have strongly maintained his innocence.
It's impossible. He cannot do it. He's such a nice, sweet child.
He's a sensitive guy. He's gentle. He has no kind of delinquency record. He's not violent.
5 years ago, journalist Sarah Koenig began investigating this story for her podcast Serial, speaking to witnesses and even Adnan himself.
It is what it is. If someone believes me or not, I have no control over it.
As the podcast's popularity grew, so did the evidence, bringing more witnesses forward, each with new information.
By coming forward, I hope that I was able to provide enough information to the judge for him to be able to make a rational decision.
Now the Supreme Court won't hear his legal team's appeal for a new trial.
So what's next for Adnan Syed? So we are joined now by the criminal defence lawyer, Ron Behlau, who joins us this morning. Ron, great to have your company this morning. Adnan has protested his innocence for almost 2 decades now. He's fought for a retrial. This is a big blow, the Supreme Court denying the appeal. Why did they reject it?
Well, the reason for the rejection at the end of the day was he relied on an alibi defence which was not properly put before the jury during his trial. He relied on what's called an incompetence of counsel argument, and the Supreme Court analysed that argument and said that ultimately, even when you considered his defence counsel and her incompetence, that they didn't think that the jury would come ultimately to a different conclusion, that is to say, a finding of guilt for him. And we often find in these cases of wrongful conviction that one of the major causes is incompetence of counsel.
Ron, David and I are 2 people who, among the millions who've listened to and digested this podcast, and one of the things when you listen to it, it just seems that all these inconsistencies seem to add up. As the podcast unfolds, Sarah Koenig comes across new witnesses who could potentially provide alibis. Do you think things could have been different if the jury knew all that information at the time?
Oh, most certainly, in my view, most certainly. Unfortunately, the appeal process isn't one that's conducted by lawyers and judges. I think that new evidence comes to light, fresh evidence comes to light, and those are compelling reasons as to why people should get a fair trial or a retrial in those circumstances.
There are also questions out there about newly tested DNA evidence that was collected during this investigation. Allegedly, did not match Syed's. Why hasn't this been taken any further?
Well, of course, fresh evidence is a reason for a retrial. I'm not sure why, to be frank, why it hasn't. It should be, of course. If his lawyers are looking for another round of appeal or a petition for mercy or clemency, they should be appropriately investigating DNA, because of course we know DNA, the advancements in DNA allow people to have retrials in these circumstances.
There's obviously a difference between journalism and the legal system.
Sure.
So when we listen to things like this, or we watch things like Making a Murderer on TV, we can sit at home and think this is an injustice. But how does it then translate into the courtroom? Is it as simple as that?
Well, that's a really good point, because at the end of the day, when you watch these programs, what you're being asked to do is effectively sit in the seat of the 12 people, that is the jury members, and to determine yourself what we call in the legal system whether there is in fact reasonable doubt. So I find it extraordinary because these programs are effectively placing you as a viewer in the seat of a jury member, and if you haven't been on the jury you wouldn't know about it until you probably watch one of these shows.
So what happens to Adnan Syed now? What options are left? They've gone to the Supreme Court, that's been denied. Can they do a retrial? What happens?
Well, what I understand from the American system is that he now has avenues, but those avenues will probably resort to petitions for clemency, appeals to the government or the executive arm effectively. There'll be no doubt some scepticism of the decision in respect of it all, but his lawyers, as I understand it, will be fighting very hard for his innocence or his claim of innocence.
And, you know, members of the public can make as much noise as they like outside a courtroom. It's still going to be up to a judge to
Doesn't
make
affect judges on
the
Twitter
ultimate
usually.
decision, isn't it?
That's correct, but we've got to remember juries find people guilty or not guilty, and judges preside over sentence. So I think the public need to understand that it's for a jury to determine guilt or innocence, and it's for a judge to determine sentence.
All right, Ron Behlau, great to have your company this morning. Thanks for the insight.
Thanks very much.